Hello, I'm Ben Lо and I'm going to take you through a stage-by-stage roundwood timber frame build of this, the Woodland Classroom at the Sustainability Centre in Hampshire. Roundwood timber framing all begun when we built the Woodland House about 9 years ago, and since then gone on to build a number of different roundwood timber frame buildings. I hope this DVD will show you the techniques we're using, how we've evolved different joints that work in particular with roundwood, and give you the opportunity to have a go yourself and create and build beautiful structures using roundwood timber. I see these building techniques having a wide range of applications, from domestic houses, community buildings, industrial buildings, agricultural and forestry structures. The opportunities are great by using roundwood. Why we use roundwood is that roundwood is stronger, it's faster growing to use as a building material than a traditional sawn timber frame building. Go up a little bit more. At the basic end, I'm a forester, a woodsman, and I want to work with timber, and I want to see timber used and forests well managed and people involved with that. And it's that desire to see timber taken from its basic form through to a high value-added product, or in this case a community classroom, that inspires me to want to make new markets for this timber. Larch is a great timber for roundwood framing as it's got really good construction strength in both bending and compression, and you can use quite small diameter timbers to build a strong structure such as this. A well-managed coppice woodland produces an abundance of poles, and this is a great resource for roundwood timber framing. There's a direct link between good forest management and the materials we need for roundwood timber frames. We can manage our forests well, grow suitable species of timber, use hand tools and create buildings that will be long-lasting and aesthetically pleasing for the future. So sweet chestnut frame, straw bale walls with lime plaster, chestnut lath internal walls with earth plaster. Insulation in the floor and the ceiling is warm cell, which is recycled newspaper. And it's still very much the inspiration from which we build our other buildings now. It's the first roundwood timber frame, and the one that I look at because it's been here the longest, so it gives us ideas of how well things are working. And overall, it's been very low maintenance and a good family home. Building a structure, a home, a place, a shelter is kind of as intrinsically within us as maybe it is for any other animal that goes out and builds a nest or a home. And I think modern day building has kind of removed that from us and created an industry which is pretty heavy on waste, pretty heavy on the fossil fuel economy to create structures that maybe are not particularly, in a lot of cases, the structures we might want to live in. This way of building not only brings back the skills and the knowledge back to people to build their own structures the way they want, but it also empowers them and tools them up to feel like they really are creating something for their own future from their local materials. And I think if roundwood timber framing can get that message across, then that's a great step forward. We've got 4 people working here who have never worked with roundwood before. One in particular has never worked with wood before, and yet working with a few people with experience, we've been able to pull this together. there's a huge opportunity for people to learn, feel empowered about being able to go out into the forest, find the timber they need, build the buildings they need. And that kind of takes away a bit of the mystique that sits around building.
I guess the ultimate goal for a lot of us here is to build that dream home one day, and that probably rings true with everyone here, I should think. So, you know, if that dream could be realised, then I think, yeah, I'd be very happy.
Here and for here.
For roundwood timber framing, when we lay out the foundations, we're not dissimilar to a lot of other buildings, especially if we're working with a building that is in its basic form square or rectangular. Once we start to deviate from that, obviously our foundations have to move away from the traditional use of right angles to find the exact corners of the building. So for a usual layout, we'll lay out string lines and use a 3-4-5 triangle to create right-angled string lines running across all four sides of the building. Even when the building is curving, we'll still start with that as our form, because if we've got an internal rectangle or square, we can measure back out from it to other points when we're laying out for the foundations. Each padstone has a number and a letter on it, and the letters represent the frames we're making on the framing bed. So you'll have row A, row B, row C, row D, and each of those will correspond to the particular frame we're working on. So for example, frame C might have 5 padstones running along the parallel length of it. So the laying out is quite critical to be sure that everything we build on the framing bed comes up in the right place. However, in this type of building there's always a slight degree of fluctuation, and therefore we build our pits that we compact the stone in slightly larger than we need to. So if we do need to adjust the padstone by a few millimetres, we have that flexibility to do it. Now on this particular site we basically have an alkaline soil. It's chalk based, and although we could compact the chalk, in order to get better results from the engineer and satisfy building control, we've gone for a limestone scalping, which we've compacted. So we've got a cubic metre of limestone scalpings compacted here. We use a jumping jack compactor and really whack this down, so you've got this firm pit of stone. Then on top of that we put a York stone slab, or a natural stone slab which has similar strength to York. This is actually a sawn slab. It's a second-hand sawn slab. Sometimes we use more riven slabs, which are a little more uneven but still quite possible to work with. So we need to make sure that we've got a level slab. Once we're happy that that slab is level in all directions, then this is where we'll take our measurement from, and this is where the foot of each particular pole coming down from the building will sit. Can you see that? Can you see the cross wires? There's like a cross, very fine cross when you're looking through the viewer, and that's where you're looking at where that lines up on the staff, yeah? So that's how we take a measurement. So that gives us a datum point, and then we'll move on to the next stone and take another measurement and work out the difference between the two. And what is actually going to be important is the difference between the datum point and the other ones. This is Lodsworth Larder Community Village Shop, and again it's a roundwood frame using sweet chestnut, coppice sweet chestnut from Lodsworth itself. The poles are quite large in this. The crux are a big diameter, and that's because it's an industrial building, so it has to meet higher specification for building regulations. We also have just had a winter where it had 12 inches of snow sitting on the roof, and so it's been tested with a lot of extra weight on top, probably as much as we're likely to see in any particular winter here. In most of the roundwood buildings we tend to have what I call indoor-outdoor spaces, verandas, decks, and these are my favourite spaces in the buildings, and gives it a real different feel to just a building where you walk straight up and in the door. Gives it this sort of extra element of being partially outside, partially inside. This area was where we cut the timber for Lodsworth Larder, a mixture of sweet chestnut, thinning out the oak standards, hazel, coppiced ash, and so this is now in its second year of regrowth. We've had an electric deer fence around it to keep the deer out, and it's now coming back well with good length of regrowth. One other thing that happened with this woodland, having not been cut for 50 years, is in the first summer after it was cut, we had a whole flush of violet helleborine orchids, quite a rare orchid that obviously had been sitting there waiting for the light to come in and came up in abundance during the summer. A key component in roundwood timber framing is the framing bed, and this consists of 6x2 sawn timbers that are made up to create a level platform upon which we lay out the frames. The layout of the framing bed actually marks exactly where certain components of the frame are going to be. So the top edge of this pair of 6x2s here marks the line of where this tie beam fits in. What that allows us to do is to make up one frame, place another frame on the same bed, and line up the tie beams in exactly the same position. So this is the tie beam here, and this is running in line with this edge. So I know exactly where my floor height is, where my tie beam height is, and when we move up to the top end, we have posts to mark where the ridge pole is going to go. So really the framing bed is a map of how the building is going to look on the horizontal. So by making it on a level horizontal bed, when we raise it up, it will come up vertical.